Your source for all things Texas Tech. This is the Ask Level podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome into another episode of the Ask Level podcast, episode number 28, alongside Chris Level. I'm Chois Woodman. It's been a wild week with some news pretty fresh as to when we're recording this with Texas Tech basketball. Red Raiders lose 2, really diminished the entire hopes of getting an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament. But the big news is Mark Adams' suspension. That's kind of become national news on that front as well. So lots to talk about, Level, in the next 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, it was obviously a tough week on the court last week. 2 close losses. I've seen a lot of that, unfortunately, this year. Very competitive and just not quite good enough at the end to get over the hump and win a game in Allen Fieldhouse or at home versus Oklahoma State. And I think you're right. I think it does diminish any hope for NCAA tournament bid short of winning the Big 12 tournament. But then you wake up to the news over the weekend, on, I say wake up to, or you get it dropped in your lap mid-morning on Sunday, that Mark has been suspended for a racially insensitive comment made to a player. And obviously you've read the release like I have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't pretend to know context here. I've seen Mark kind of is talked to some national media about quoting scripture and trying to. The analogy was just I'm the coach, you're the player. Essentially, listen to what I say.
Sure.
I guess pointed to a Bible verse out of the book of Ephesians, and there's some insensitive language, I guess, that a player could perceive. And so there's just no winners here in this deal, and I don't know where we all go from here. I know most people are going to want like answers on kind of what happens. I think that is, depending on when you listen to this, that is still either has been decided or is still up for discussion. And I think, Kirby and the folks in charge of Texas Tech athletics will have to determine, based on variety of conversations they have with a lot of players and staff over at Texas Tech basketball, kind of, okay, what went on, what has gone on, and ultimately that will decide it. And you take all the facts there and then you proceed accordingly. But it sucks, all of it, because you've got families and you've got student athletes and you've got a bunch of just kind of chaos here a bit, and it's not the way you want to go into a postseason tournament. And I know people are kind of, again, curious about where you go from here. And I would say, just before anybody wonders anymore, I think all options are on the table at this point. I think that,
sure,
yeah, they could make a change at head coach. They could reinstate him immediately. I just, because we are not privy to all the details, but I know enough to know that I would say everything is likely on the table here. It just, the whole thing kind of sucks.
Yeah, the whole situation is about as not fun, that's a good way you put it, as it can get. You pile it on with the results from the week, and that stuff seems kind of minuscule when you get that kind of news, but it still does combine, because you have games to play this week. You have potential postseason games, whether you're going to participate in the NIT or whatever that looks like, or if you go win 4 in a row.
And this may alter that thought process too.
It could, absolutely.
I mean, it absolutely could alter that process as well. It's just because I never thought this is something we would be talking about or discussing.
No.
again, don't know exactly the timing of everything, but I mean, I can just speak to it's clear to me that this happened late last week based on the press release sent out by Wes Bloomquist, who I work with closely with the radio broadcast, and obviously the men's basketball program. And a couple of things that it doesn't tell you in there. What it does tell you, that Kirby was made aware of this on Friday, and that so it had to have happened sometime between getting home from Kansas and Friday afternoon, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't notice anything necessarily out of the norm over the weekend on Saturday at the arena. I was there for a lot of the day, and it just seemed business as usual. You didn't think you played particularly well. Thought Oklahoma State kind of got out there and jumped on you. Is there a direct correlation into some of this going on? Possibly. It was a senior day for Kevin O'Banner, and again, you'd kind of been in that game like you'd been in a lot of them, and you just couldn't quite get over the hump. And 14 made threes. Your bench played really, really well. You turn it over less than the opposition, and it was just like it was a bizarre game. And talking to Mark afterward, that's what we talked about, and he just seemed normal and was just basically saying that, hey, we'll have them ready for Kansas City. And, we talked about playing West Virginia a little bit, and then this happens, or this gets reported. And so Kirby Hocutt and whoever on his staff is helping him with this process and figuring out what went on and what has gone on. Is there any other, because there's obviously some other incidents that have been reported on nationally now, or I say incidents, another one, I guess, specifically. And I guess these players will get a chance to kind of voice their not opinion, but tell their side of the story, I guess, is the best way to say that. And then it's up to Kirby to kind of put these pieces together and figure out how to proceed here. But yeah, I think Troy, I think you hit on it a second ago. I think that we would all be naive if you were in second place here. I think that maybe things would be viewed differently than what has happened, which you finished in ninth place in the Big 12. And I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know what all has gone on, or I don't know what. I'm not there every day. I'm around it more than most. And I'm on the road with these guys, but I'm not around them in many cases either. And so certainly not on the normal Tuesday practice and things like that, that's just in the middle of the week or whatever. So I just don't know what all is going to be said and what all, I just, yeah, but I mean, they're all options are on the table here. I think on going forward, I just don't know what. Yeah, it's option A, B, C, or D.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's kind of an opening for the players, and you may have players that will voice dissent or frustration or whatever. But then again, this is also open for players that want to voice support for Mark Adams. So we have no idea what this next 24 hours, what this next week is going to look like. But yeah, I completely agree. I think no news on the other side of right now would be surprising. Like I think.
Yeah, and I would be remiss in saying, look, I've never seen or in this day and age, a racially insensitive comment, depending on how it was taken or whatever, it's to be treated, in the way that it's being treated. I certainly understand that and grasp it. And I've never witnessed anything like that. I think a lot of people over there. I'm friends with a lot of those people, their families. I mean, I see, and when you do what I do, and Choice, you kind of seen a little bit of this too, but you see people at their highest, you see people at their lowest,
Sure.
and again, there's a lot of families involved, and so many and student athletes involved, and everybody just wants Texas Tech basketball to be healthy and thriving, and for
Yeah.
good experiences to be had. And I'm not trying to be, you know, coming at it from a place where, puppy dogs and rainbows and sprinkles on my ice cream and all that stuff. I'm not suggesting that. I know that sports are hard, and people win and people lose, and when you lose, it sucks. And
Yep.
and so but that's my first thought, was that I just you worry and are concerned for a lot of people over there, not just Mark and the player involved, but because this is going to affect the whole machine
Sure.
over there, depending on kind of how this thing goes. But yeah, it just sucks, especially right there on the cusp of a postseason tournament. But yeah, I
Well,
just still processing it, though. I just
yeah,
wasn't.
no, I know. This is
Yeah.
pretty fresh news to us as we're recording this. Leah, here, we'll go to our first question from the audience. Leah asks first, will Tech accept a bid to the NIT, and who is going to be the interim coach in this Adams suspension?
Well, I think that Tech was somewhat keen on an NIT possibility before this happened. Now I simply don't know. And I'm not sure, if you go lose Wednesday night, I'm not sure if you'll get one. I don't know that. And I with all this going on here, that certainly factors in. It will, and it has
Sure.
to. As far as interim coaches, my guess would be if somebody is placed in an interim scenario to coach the game on Wednesday and it's not Mark, my guess is it would be Al Pinkins or Steve Green, but I can't, and probably Al Pinkins, but I don't know that for sure. But I would think Al was probably what would be the call there. And and I would guess that we'll know that fairly soon. And if people are watching this, listening to it at some point on a like if you're watching this Monday afternoon, we may already know that answer.
That's true. Yeah,
but
that's
true. Because that choice, the release as sent out, I think it is telling in that there's one thing missing in it, and it doesn't tell you who the interim coach is. And it basically does tell you that they are investigating this, which I take that to mean investigating it right now.
Yeah.
And haven't made a determination yet on how to proceed. And so I think that you'll get more news before this team goes to Kansas City, I guess, on who the interim coach is. Will Mark Adams' suspension continue through the Big 12 tournament? Whatever. But it's tricky. And here's why you will really need a quick resolution here on whatever happens, because once your season does end, that's when, the bullets start flying from the standpoint of, the portal and everything like that.
Yeah.
That, with player movement and all that. And if you don't know, if there's uncertainty with your coach or staff or roster, it can be a bit tricky. So we'll just kind of see what the next day or two looks like.
A few of these questions might have been, might have had different answers a few hours ago. So there's some that may just be, I don't know. So like Dallas, who asks, Level, who do you think would be leaving this program in the summer, and who's going to be staying? So that could be completely different from what it would have been before.
I completely agree.
So that's almost impossible to answer right now.
It kind of would have been anyway.
Sure, it would have. Yeah,
but much more so now, just because. And and I would guess that 2 or 3 days before these kids were going to play in the Big 12 tournament, they didn't at all think that they would be sitting there in a meeting with their athletic director, answering questions about day to day and kind of what has been said to you. What is your opinion? I don't know. I don't know how those things go, but that's got to be fairly surreal for an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid that just came here to hoop, and
Absolutely.
but that's the reality of where we're at here.
Yeah, and let's look at the game itself, or the games themselves, and from just kind of sidestep from the Adams news. And you were in a situation you kind of knew going into the week. You win those two, you would have been in these NCAA tournament. Even a scenario where late in the week, the bracketologists, the Lenardis of the world were saying, hey, if you win against Oklahoma State and then maybe go reel off 3 and get to the championship of the Big 12, maybe they're still an at-large bid for Texas Tech there. But neither of those, obviously, the scenario. You win, or excuse me, you lose both games, lose another close one in Lawrence, lose one where you just didn't play that well at home against Oklahoma State. And I don't know about you, but it just kind of felt like it epitomized the season, especially that Oklahoma State game,
a little bit
of what you've gone through.
And yet, if you tell me before the game you make 2 more threes than they do, you made 14.
Yeah.
You outscore their bench by 20.
Yep.
You turn it over less than they did. They are going to be without one of their key subs in Keon Williams, who I think was the only other player for them the first matchup that it was in double figures. He's not there due to a personal issue, and that you've got everybody available and healthy. I mean, one of the first times ever you had your complete roster available and healthy, and that you're going to lose that one. I wouldn't have necessarily believed you, but that's kind of where you're at. They just shot the lights out and were just better on the glass in key times than you were. But yeah, it just kind of summed up the season. I mean, and I even said to Mark after the game and asked him, hey, look, you went through senior day today. You just had the one. Got to be a direct correlation there into a really small senior day and a lot of close losses. And he agreed, he absolutely agreed. This is a very young and inexperienced team, even though that they are older now than they were at the beginning of the season. They've got some experience. The point still stands.
Sure.
And yet so much of all of that now is different and changes a bit just because of the news from Sunday where there's a head coach that's been suspended. And look, Mark's been great to me. I don't know what went on here, but I obviously Kirby and the powers that be over at Texas Tech felt this was very serious in nature. And as we've seen the way it's been reported nationally, that there's a lot of opinions, both sides of it. I think a lot of people going, I can't believe this is a big deal, and other people are suggesting he'll never coach another game here. I don't know where we end up. But like I said, there's no winners here at all. This whole thing sucks.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the big picture, it's hard to even find a big picture right now. You can't even.
Yeah. I'm looking for the next couple of hours.
Right.
I'm looking for what Wednesday looks like. I'm looking for, but I can't emphasize enough that depending on whatever it is that you do, you have to get resolution fairly quickly. And it's not because of a game on Wednesday night. A quick resolution may take a week or two. I'm just saying this isn't something that Tech will, or any school could afford to leave just hanging out there for a while.
Sure.
Just because you have to put a roster together, and that all happens in late March, early April, and early May. I mean, all those, that's the sweet spot. And if you're not ready to strike when you need to talk to a player about staying where you're at, he's hearing from a million other folks. For example, most of your roster, if they were to transfer, most of them would have to sit out a year.
Yeah.
Is this now a scenario to where they would be allowed to go anywhere with no penalty? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair question to ask aloud. And like you said, somebody was asking a while ago, who's back and who's not, all that stuff. Who in the heck knows?
Yeah.
who's in charge, and as in head coach and then plural. Is it the same staff? Because you got some really smart basketball people over there, man, and but they haven't played well, particularly this year.
Mhm.
And you hope that a young nucleus were to come back. That's the way that you're hoping, but rarely does it work like that, where you have a young nucleus and then you bring them all back and they get better and learn from it, and they become a force in a year or two. But yeah, everything is on the table at this point. I would just say so. Nothing we are told now would surprise me. I guess at this point. And I think that right, wrong, or indifferent, a lot of those players and staff members or whoever is being interviewed will kind of get to ultimately decide how things go from here.
Yeah.
There's finances at stake. There's moral clauses. There's contractual obligation. I mean, there's all kinds of things you sort through, but I don't begin to know what in the world will happen here.
Kyle asked this, going back to, you mentioned senior day and your lone senior, but Kyle asks, why didn't Davion Harmon and Fardaz Amack have a senior day?
Well, because they can both come back. That's why. Fardaz and Davion Harmon each have another year that they can play. I think, though, they are two that I think they are considered or will be considered graduates, which means they could actually play elsewhere if they wanted to with no penalty. They could grad transfer as the one person that can do whatever the heck they want, and
It's kind of like it used to be. Same.
yeah, if
same
they
rule
want to
there.
play where they want to play. I mean, I think there's no penalty at all there, and so I think that's why, because they each have, and I guess intend to use that extra year of eligibility.
Yeah, that's part of the interesting part, because they give them the option, right? If they're a senior, they could walk or they could be out there
Well,
on
yeah, and
senior day.
you've got COVID years, you've got all kinds of stuff, yeah, and
Right.
so I want to say that didn't Tony Bradford and Jalen Hutchings go through senior day?
I believe they did. Yeah.
Yeah, and so guess what? They'll get to go through it
They'll
again.
go through it again, which I'm happy
I think,
about.
yeah, like Joey's point was that, hey, man, go through it. And if you end
Sure.
up going through it again, great. But you weren't, at that point, they weren't real sure
Yeah.
what they were going to do. And I think a period of 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm just using those guys as examples because
Right.
they had the option to return or not, and they chose to return. But I think at the time they weren't really there yet. And so, you just end up going through senior day ceremonies twice, so that doesn't cost anything.
That's right. Another question from Shelly says, Shelly, I'd like to hear, or sorry, Shelly said, Level, I'd like to hear your take on what this basketball program looks like in 3 years, a scenario with Adams and one without.
Yeah, I
everybody wants to know the future now, and I get it.
And Shelly, I can't tell you what it looks like in 2 days, much less, and really, even if you say that this hasn't happened and Mark is still the head coach, I think things are changing so much year by year with not just your roster, but your coaching staff and all those things. Not real sure what that looks like. I'm not real sure, like I said, what Tuesday looks like or Wednesday looks like, much less 3 years from now. But again, we all want the same thing. There's so many things to like about this men's basketball program. It has had a 9th place finish. The crowds, for the most part, have been there at every home game. I think it's got unbelievable facilities. I think there's a lot of support for it. The fire is still burning. People want to be relevant, and there's a lot of financial support for men's basketball here. And so I just, that's we all want the same things. That's so I just hope that in 3 years from now, whoever's in charge of it, and if it's Mark or somebody else, that it's healthy and thriving. That's not to sound corny or anything, but that's my wish. But I can't tell you that for sure or not, because I've seen this thing at rock bottom.
Sure.
And arguably the worst Power 5 program in the country. and then I've seen it nearly at the top of the mountain. And so, yeah, go figure.
Yeah, it's you've been through some vastly different programs, but this is a pretty low. It's been a low year, but now you hit an even lower point for this year with the suspension of Mark Adams, and we don't know what this week looks like, Level. But without knowing who's coaching, what are the anticipations for you in Kansas City? What do you expect? We know Tech plays in West or against West Virginia in the first round. If you were to win that game, you get Kansas, correct? In the second round. I mean, so
which is a road game. I mean, I've done that
absolutely.
many times before. It's Kansas City does a wonderful job of supporting that tournament, but when you play the Kansases, the Kansas States, the Iowa States of the world, it's a road game, and it's not necessarily fair. But I guess if you ever make it to the football game, you can largely potentially play a home game, from the football standpoint. It's just
do you
how
think
it
those
is.
should rotate? I'm talking all sports. Like, it should basketball go Oklahoma City some, go DFW some, or
I think when they tried it, the support just wasn't there. I attended the men's basketball tournament at the American Airlines Center. Also attended it at the what are we calling that place in Oklahoma City? I can't remember the new name of the arena now. Chesapeake Center, the Chesapeake Arena, maybe.
Yeah,
I was there at it then. Mike Singletary scored 28 straight points on Texas A&M.
Oh yeah,
and it's not near as well attended because it is a money making venture for the conference.
Sure,
Kansas City, it's pretty much every game is sold out, and they support it wildly. So I don't know. I think in a perfect world, sure, but I doubt that that's what anybody that's in charge of the business part of it is going to agree with that, and that's just part of the deal. And again, it sucks because it's like those three fan bases that I mentioned, they treat it like everybody takes off work, everybody spends that week, and you're just like, you're hopeful that your team can get a couple of games, and it's like day sports. It's like the city just stops what they're doing, and it's all about what goes on in the Sprint Center and then the whole Power and Light District and everything like that. But yeah, I thought, going into yesterday, some interesting results over the weekend on a Saturday in the games, and going into the game against Oklahoma State. I knew that, West Virginia was a possibility. Oklahoma State was a possibility. I'm kind of sitting there thinking, well, the best case scenario is, I think if you could beat Oklahoma State here, that's what you were gonna see again on Wednesday. And I thought that's the better matchup for you. I don't know. I mean, because West Virginia's been playing really good since you beat them in Morgantown. West Virginia's been playing some really good basketball lately, and they've pulled off some upsets, and they've been really good. They beat Iowa State, they beat Kansas State, but they're starting to kind of figure it out here, and they're firmly in the tournament at this point. I think that's the tougher matchup for you, and so I just didn't like the way that it played out over the weekend for you, and that you lose to Oklahoma State, and then you're staring at West Virginia in the face, because I think they're kind of figuring it out and starting to play a little bit better. So from the basketball standpoint, it's not going to surprise me a bit, win or lose on Wednesday, but obviously beating Kansas on and Kansas got taken to the woodshed a bit over the weekend as well. But I think,
you
for
played them close twice too. I mean, nothing's impossible, but man, the problem with this team is figuring out a way to win any of those close games. So,
well, yes, and the problem right now is you have no idea what their mindset will be going into this tournament.
Very true.
I mean, you have no idea. They could actually, depending on what happens, they could have extra motivation. They could be down in the dumps. They could be thinking about a million different things other than a basketball game on Wednesday night. I have no way of knowing. As many coaches spend their entire day thinking about ways to eliminate distractions, especially when you're playing meaningful games. Sure. And this is just a giant one dropped in your lap here, and they're all dealing with it. And so, does some preparation slip by? Do they want to rally together? I mean, who the heck knows, man? I mean, I again, all on the table.
Absolutely. So a lot of unknowns to leave you with this week, and And
Yeah, and I
knows?
apologize for being like that. It's
No,
just
but I
we
mean,
just
how
simply
else?
don't know the answers to a lot of the questions out there, and I'm as curious as anybody. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'd love to be able to tell you kind of what was going to happen or when or whatever. We just simply
sure.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So we sit here with our own question marks, and as we head into the week, I mean, that goes with the basketball team, that goes with the coaching staff, whatever. It is just a giant question mark surrounding Texas Tech basketball, and we might, when we rejoin you next week, we might have some more answers. There may still be a lot in the air.
Well,
But
you will have more answers one way or the other, in my opinion.
true,
I just
true.
don't know what those will be, and
Yeah,
who. I mean, like I said, it could remain very much a story here, depending on how this thing plays out for a period of days and weeks, or you could get closure on this immediately.
yeah,
I think that's why I say all is on the table here, and I just no winners in this whole deal, but
no.
certainly hope that everybody ends up okay and on their feet and we resume normal activity. But again, that may be wishful thinking on my part.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the hope, that it's all a bad misunderstanding, miscommunication, bad whatever, and things would turn out good. But yeah, there's no way of knowing what's going to happen. There's a lot this week we weren't able to get to. The conference realignment is as hot as it's been in a long time.
Yep.
Pac-12, yeah, there's all sorts of things going on there, so we'll probably visit about
Yeah,
some of
something's
that
going to
next
happen
week.
there. Something's going to happen there
Pretty
fairly
quick.
soon too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be careful about buying into too much of the timeline that's been reported. There is no
The March stuff.
there is no drop dead deadline on anything here. This is a game of chicken in some ways. There is no, any timeline floated by whoever is reporting on whatever angle they're reporting on has simply been suggested to them that we would prefer, we would like,
Yeah.
all those things. There's nothing, there. This could go into May or June for all we know. And
Yeah, the only thing that is set is that there's a 2024 expiration of the grant of rights for the Pac-12, right?
correct.
So that's the only actual deadline out there. Now, there may be some behind closed doors between ESPN and Fox and Amazon or whoever and the Pac-12, but that's the only thing that we know is it expires in 2024.
Right. Yeah,
So,
because the Pac-12 is trying to get a media rights deal. Shocker, we know this. They have to get what they feel is a good deal. Again, Captain Obvious there, but can they? Do they?
yeah,
Does everybody agree with that? And
Mhm.
then you have to convince all members of this league, okay, we got it done. Now we want to lock everybody in for the next
Sure.
period of 5 to 7 years. And so we're stuck together. So, all right, everybody put your hand in, let's huddle up and break the huddle. I mean, there's just a lot of things that need to happen. And I'm not convinced that you can get to that point. I could be wrong. I think many are still suggesting that they will get to that point. But I think there's enough out there that from many that are suggesting you won't get to that point to where we're going to have something happen here. I think it is fair to say, Choice, I don't buy that the Pac-12 is done. However, I also think that the Pac-12 looks very differently going forward. And I think both can be true. Just because you read the Pac-12 is not going to break up, that could be true. I just don't know if it will consist of the 10 current members that it has. And that's maybe where the Colorado States, the SMUs, the Boise's, the San Diego States, maybe they fill the void. And that's what, and you end up becoming stronger of it. So I think that all can be true. You just have to be careful of how you process this information and see kind of how it's written out there. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think it could be like the Big East. Remember when they kind of broke up and West Virginia left and other Miami left? I think you could end up seeing something like that where the conference itself still exists as a name, but the teams within are nothing close to what you're used to seeing. So yeah, will be very interesting to watch that story over the next few weeks as well. But Level,
exhale. Yeah, man. Yeah, keep hope alive. We'll try to do the best we can here. If something happens soon, maybe we come back and do another one of these. I just simply, as we're finishing this up. I just don't know where we go from here. But you got a game this week. That much I do know. It's against West Virginia, and you're going to try to win it. And keep hope alive, everybody.
All right, appreciate it, Level.
Thank you.
That's Chris Level. I'm Chois Woodman. You've been tuned in to another episode of the Ask Level podcast, brought to you by Double T 97.3.
You've been listening to the Ask Level podcast, powered by Double T 97.3.